Good morning, everybody. So, when we left off yesterday, I was reading chapter 3 of part 3 of the end of the book. And we only have this much to go, and I want to point out that this bit right here is actually the Principles of Newspeak appendix, so it's not even part of the book. So we are so close. So when we left off, O'Brien and Winston were having a conversation about the inner workings of the party and the ideals of the party, and they're kind of having that back and forth metaphysical argument, so to speak. And the most haunting part of that conversation, for me anyway, is that very end when Winston says, "Tell me, how soon will they shoot me?" And then O'Brien replies, "It might be a long time. You're a difficult case, but don't give up hope. Everything is cured sooner or later. In the end, we shall shoot you." Because remember, they don't shoot heretics. They don't kill people who are still oppositions to the party. They cure them of their insanity by means of torturing them in the ministry of love. And then, and as O'Brien has been telling Winston, they break you down and they until you're a shell of a person, and then they fill you back up with all of their party stuff. And then only when you have this pure love for Big Brother do they go ahead and shoot you. So O'Brien is like, "Don't worry, we're gonna kill you. Don't worry about it. But we have to cure you first. But it'll happen. We'll shoot you. Don't worry." I'm picking it up on page 274 in the paperback book, beginning of chapter 4. He was much better. He was growing fatter and stronger every day, if it was proper to speak of days. The white light and the humming sound were the same as ever, but the cell was a little more comfortable than the others he had been in. There was a pillow and a mattress on the blank bed and a stool to sit on. They had given him a bath, and they allowed him to wash himself fairly frequently in a tin basin. They even gave him warm water to wash in. They had given him new underclothes and a clean suit of overalls. They had dressed his varicose ulcer with soothing ointment. They had pulled out the remnants of his teeth and given him a new set of dentures. Okay. They're doing a lot of really nice things for Winston. Why are they doing that? Why would they waste all that time on... dentures are expensive, are they not? Why would they spend all this time giving him new stuff, letting him take baths? Why now? Well, from that past conversation, I think maybe O'Brien thought that Winston was on his way to recovery enough that they could pull back on the torture a little bit, and they could start giving him things to kind of reinstate this belief that Big Brother will provide. Big Brother is your friend. If you're alone in this cell and you've just been tortured a ton, and then they're like, "Oh, we'll give you all these really nice things." His brain must be just so scrambled right now, and these simple things that are so necessary but he hasn't had for a long time, they would just seem like such a blessing. So they're just trying to trick him. Okay. Weeks or months must have passed. It must have been possible now to keep count of the passage of time if he had felt any interest in doing so, since he was being fed at what appeared to be regular intervals. He was getting, he judged, 3 meals in the 24 hours. Sometimes he wondered dimly whether he was getting them by night or by day. The food was surprisingly good, with meat at every third meal. Once there was even a packet of cigarettes. He had no matches, but the never-speaking guard who brought his food would give him a light. The first time he tried to smoke, it made him sick, but he persevered and spun the packet out for a long time, smoking half a cigarette after each meal. They had given him a white slate with a stump of pencil tied to the corner. At first he made no use of it. Even when he was awake, he was completely torpid. Often he would lie from one meal to the next almost without stirring, sometimes asleep, sometimes waking into vague reveries in which it was too much trouble to open his eyes. He had long grown used to sleeping with a strong light on his face. It seemed to make no difference, except that one's dreams were more coherent. He dreamed a great deal all through the time, and they were always happy dreams. He was in the Golden Country, or he was sitting among enormous, glorious sunlit ruins, with his mother, with Julia, with O'Brien, not doing anything, merely sitting in the sun, talking of peaceful things. Such thoughts as he had had when he was awake were mostly about his dreams. He seemed to have lost the power of intellectual effort, now that the stimulus of pain had been removed. He was not bored. He had no desire for conversation or distraction, merely to be alone, not to be beaten or questioned, to have enough to eat and to be clean all over was completely satisfying. That's all he wants. He has no desire for anything else at this point. They have completely beaten all of that out of him. The desire to be loved, the desire for friendships, the desire for anything else is gone. All he wants is to not be beaten and to be alone. And he's like, oh, if I could just have that, I would just be completely satisfied. That's terrifying. That's terrifying if that's what's happened to him. By degrees, he came to spend less time in sleep, but he still felt no impulse to get off the bed. All he cared for was to lie quiet and feel the strength gathering in his body. He would finger himself here and there, trying to make sure that it was not an illusion that his muscles were growing rounder and his skin taunter. Finally, it was established beyond a doubt that he was growing fatter. His thighs were now definitely thicker than his knees. After that, reluctantly at first, he began exercising himself regularly. In a little while, he could walk 3 kilometers, measuring by pace the cell, and his bowed shoulders were growing straighter. He attempted more elaborate exercises and was astonished and humiliated to find what things he could not do. He could not move out of a walk. He could not hold a stool out at arm's length. He could not stand on one leg without falling over. He squatted down on his heels and found that with agonizing pains in thigh and calf, he could just lift himself to a standing position. He lay flat on his belly and tried to lift his weight by his hands. It was hopeless. He could not raise himself a centimeter. But after a few more days, a few more mealtimes, even that feat was accomplished. A time came when he could do it in 6 times running. He began to grow actually proud of his body and to cherish an intermittent belief that his face also was growing back to normal. Only when he chanced to put his hand on his bald scalp did he remember the seamed, ruined face that had looked back at him out of the mirror. His mind grew more active. He sat down on the plank bed, his back against the wall and the slate on his knees, and set to work deliberately at the task of re-educating himself. He had capitulated. That was agreed. In reality, as he saw now, he had been ready to capitulate long before he had taken the decision. From the moment when he was inside the Ministry of Love, and yes, even during those minutes when he and Juliet stood helpless while the iron voice from the telescreen told him what to do, he had grasped the frivolity, the shallowness of his attempt to set himself up against the power of the party. He knew now that for 7 years the thought police had watched him like a beetle under a magnifying glass. There was no physical act, no spoken aloud, but they had not noticed, no train of thought that they had not been able to infer. Even the speck of whitish dust on the cover of his diary they had carefully replaced. They had played soundtracks to him, shown him photographs. Some of them were photographs of Julian himself. Yes, even. He could not fight against the party any longer. Besides, the party was in the right. It must be so. How could the immortal, collective brain be mistaken? By what external standard could you check its judgments? Sanity was statistical. It was merely a question of learning to think as they thought, only... Okay, do you see that? You see that thought process? So that is entirely different from that of the previous chapter, where Winston is trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and he is actively pushing against the party and pushing against O'Brien's arguments. But here he is completely given over to this idea. You know, he even says, how could the immortal collective brain be mistaken? And remember, you know, and also that next part, by what external standard could you check its judgments? And remember, that is the thing that he's been searching for, is this way that you can tell if something is real or not by something external outside of your brain, because if you can prove its existence or something is real or not real without anybody else around, then you know that external reality lives outside of your brain and that the party doesn't control it. But here he is given over to the idea that the external reality is only controlled in your brain, and since the party controls the brains, the party controls external reality. And I'll leave it there, picking it up in my next video.